truth as a function. I think from a philosophical perspective, I'm talking about pragmatism, which I believe is basically ideas are measured on whether or not how true they are, if based off their success, which I pretty much agree with. Um, but I don't identify as a pragmatist. I think the whole concept of choosing to identify as things is kind of silly. Like when I was a nihilist, I never identified as a nihilist. I just realized that was my outlook. That's what I believed in. That's what I acted like. That idea kind of had me. And it provided some interesting experiences, have some interesting stories from that time. But ultimately, I'm against that. It sucked. It was not fun to think that everything is pointless. Eventually started coming out of that, got into philosophy, basically just trying to understand the meaning of life, trying to figure out what was going on, why my actions mattered. Ultimately, like I really was trying to look for the answers, which is a difficult task. And then I spent a lot of time reading, looking up YouTube videos on philosophy, different philosophers' ideas, getting into some esoteric stuff, meditation, psychedelics, isolation, intense physical activity, a lot of writing, thinking, and I realized that my lack of having a concrete answer, my lack of having a concrete set of beliefs, of faith, was allowing me, or I was using it as a justification to just continue fooling around. And I noticed that in myself, and I was like, oh, that's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. Like, I get it. And then a few years later, I had a religious experience, and there's a book by William James called The Varieties of Religious Experience, I believe. I think it was published like 100 years ago. This one particular um, print, I think from like Penguin House, there's like an image on the front cover of basically like a vortex in the sky. And I experienced something just like that without going into detail on that experience for the sake of time. And it's also very difficult to put into words that, but after that experience, it, it just, it just like cut through all the mist and the BS of like all this up here, thinking about the meaning of life, blah, blah, blah. And I just felt that I have to, what I came away with from that is like I just have to focus on what I think I'm supposed to do and say what I'm supposed to say, and then that's it. And going back to a few years before that, like I was working at a job, was working at my parents' company. It's basically very safe, secure, made sense from, you know, on paper. It was the safe thing to do. I was making money, saving money, and didn't have any debt or anything, but I was growing miserable, and I wanted to just quit my job and travel, but I thought that was quite silly. I was like 29 at the time. And but then ultimately I spent some time alone, went off in the woods, had some reflection, and I decided that I'm gonna freaking go for it, because I basically just went hiking and would sleep in my car or in a tent or whatever, and I just realized like I'm feeling a lot better than I have in a while, and I basically I'm living like a homeless person, so I don't need much to be happy. So screw it, I'm gonna go for it. And then ever since I made that decision, it just my uh, sadness or depression, my whatever, just evaporated. And and I think it's very important to embrace. Like you have to figure it out. You have to discover it. Like what's really gonna call you forward. What's gonna make you your life. What's gonna make you experience vitality and just like, you know, some getting on after it, light a fire under your ass. And ultimately, like for me, that's what I, for me it was just like the action of moving forward with this idea that I'm gonna figure everything out. It's gonna be fine, and if it's not fine, then you know I'm gonna die, which we're all gonna die anyway. And I see, you know, a lot of people stuck in this up here explainy trying to, but they lack that fire in them. And I think that's one of the most important things we got. And like truth as a function, like just I just try and find now if I'm trying to figure out what to do, like on this trip now, biking all across the country, 150 states, like, it was really scary before I decided to do that because it, it is quite risky in many regards. But then ultimately, it's what I feel like I'm supposed to do, and it's motivates me. And, furthermore, it's just like having gone through all this theological, philosophical, trying to figure everything out, having this religious experience, it's like, is it possible that's what God wants me to do? And in that sense, it's the safest thing I can do. And so when I think that way, and I think about these grand ideas into and incorporate them into specific action, and it seems like that action is good. And also, like, ever since not to go down this road too much, but like ever since I decided to go on this crazy trip I'm on, I experienced lots of synchronicities, which is interesting, but we'll just leave it at that. But I think what is true is what moves you forward.